I came on that I'm keen to get them on quickly. Effectively, what we're looking at here is South Africa as a gateway and what a difference it makes to the continent and the advantages and disadvantages of South Africa as a portal, to use a rather Googlish word, to that continent. And also on top of that, the strengths and weaknesses, particularly given the caliber of people we've got here, of South African government and South Africa as a business hub. And the four people I've got here are Linda Hudson, who's the Chief Executive and President of BAE Systems, Sizwe Nxasana, which I've practiced, is the Chief Executive Officer of FirstRand Group, Luke McKend, who's the Country Manager for Google, and finally Thierry Tanoh, who's the Vice President Sub-Saharan Africa for the IFC. And what I've asked each of them to do is to speak for around 3 to 4 minutes, have some opening remarks, then we'll have a debate here. And then once again, I'll throw it open to you. I notice that all of you have near journalistic qualities when it comes to interrogating people, so I hope that will pursue. I'm going to hand over to Linda for her opening remarks first, and then we'll go through each of them, and then we'll come back and begin the discussion.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for inviting me to participate on the panel. I think I bring a unique perspective of operating a global defense and security company with a subsidiary here in South Africa. Not only do we have to operate in accordance with South African business, employment, and export laws, but we must comply with the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act because we manage our business in South Africa out of the U.S. Additionally, because the ultimate ownership of our corporation is in the U.K., we must also comply with the UK anti-bribery law. Managing these multiple constituent interests presents many challenges for us in an emerging market, and it has so far limited our ability to expand both in South Africa and in Sub-Saharan Africa. Despite the challenges that all of that presents for us, though, we have a vibrant and very well-performing business. But contrary to what we had planned and our desires, which was to grow our footprint in South Africa and expand it into Sub-Saharan Africa, we find that our business primarily exports to North America and to Europe. So the bulk of our business is done to serve the developed world, and we have not yet been successful in expanding the business serving the South African government and the Sub-Saharan African countries. And I look forward to having further discussion on that.
Very interesting, key issue. Sizwe.
Thanks very much. Again, thanks also for inviting me to this panel. From FirstRand, we see a number of developments, especially with the shift in the world GDP growth, from the more westernized countries to the east. We've certainly seen a shift in terms of how corporations operate in Africa. And there are two broad themes that are driving the developments in the continent. One is around natural resources, soft as well as hard commodities. And secondly, infrastructure has become a huge theme, especially in terms of the different countries that are now, maybe at the beginning stages of growing and building their infrastructure. And with that, we see an increase in the involvement of China or corporations from China, as well as India in the continent. And as a bank, we operate, we've done transactions on our investment banking side in 34 countries in the continent, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and we have operations in 7 countries in terms of retail and commercial banking activities. And that shift is clearly visible in all the different countries that we either planning to go into or those countries that we already have a presence in. And I think, if you look at, what is South Africa doing to create itself as a hub? Clearly, sometimes you get a sense that we spend more time as a country talking about what's going on here, nationalization and a lot of some of the debates that take place in this country, and forget that the world is actually moving at quite a rapid pace. And Africa has become not a continent that is talked about in the context of aid, but is talked about increasingly in terms of the investment or business opportunities that exist. So I think we have a number of interesting challenges as a country to position ourselves to continue operating as a hub in the continent.
Very interesting.
Once again, many thanks for the invitation. It's interesting that having only been back in South Africa for the last 3 months and been out of the country for the last 12 years or so, I think I was incredibly privileged to see how technology and the internet in particular has had a virtually transformative impact on virtually every aspect of a society where internet access is for all intents and purposes ubiquitous. In just over a decade, existing industries have been challenged. We've seen entire new business models that have been spawned, and virtually everyone now has the ability to consume media virtually everywhere, and not just consume media, but to actually create it as well. And as a result, the internet has become one of the most powerful platforms in history for innovation, for collaboration, and for commerce. In fact, almost overnight, the internet has emerged as a key pillar for the driver of economic growth in most economies worldwide. Our sense is that growth in internet adoption is a key pillar for economic development and sustainable growth. In fact, a recent World Bank study based on the analysis of about 120 countries indicated that a 10% change in broadband adoption is associated with a 1.38% increase in GDP per capita growth, particularly in developing countries. Now, in South Africa, it's estimated that wireless broadband and related industries could generate up to 1.8% of GDP. So that's roughly, depending on how you measure it, about 72 billion rand by 2015. But South Africa needs to maintain a competitive edge as far as internet and connectivity is concerned, or our sense is risk losing out to places like Kenya and Nigeria, which are fast catching up as far as connectivity and innovation are concerned. Now, although connectivity has grown fairly rapidly to date at about 15% year on year, certainly 2009, 2010, and we expect similar rates of growth, our sense is that there's going to have to be a huge effort from all stakeholders in the economy in order to achieve the government's national broadband policy objectives. Our sense is also that a healthy internet ecosystem needs to be easily accessible, and it also needs plenty of local relevant content. And in South Africa, we have a dearth of local content. In fact, from a Google point of view, we can see that much of the content that's consumed does not originate in South Africa. The South African telecoms environment also remains overpriced, and internet penetration is as a result fairly low. Access costs are high, environment not as competitive as it could be, and that means that we don't even compete as well as we could with countries in our peer group from a GDP per capita point of view, such as Poland or Mexico or Brazil. Now, of course, there are huge positives that have emerged over the last few years, and perhaps even more recently. There's a huge appetite for innovation in South Africa, and we see services such as Mixit, or even a recent acquisition of a group called Twangu by Groupon in South Africa as signs that there's a burgeoning internet economy. However, despite the fact that we're not as connected as Europe or the US and many of our peers defined by GDP and geography, there are these successful examples. We also see that there's an increasing recognition that the technology sector can drive economic growth. Our main concern is around pace, is the rate of change. As we've seen elsewhere in the world, the rate of change is relentless. If we don't speed up our efforts to create the conditions necessary for a vibrant, connected commercial sector, we run the risk of losing out to further north. And ultimately, we believe that addressing the question of connectivity for all South Africans is absolutely critical to the growth of this country.
Thank you for inviting us. So let me give you a little bit of our perspective. The IFC is part of the World Bank Group, and our aim is to invest in the private sector in Sub-Saharan Africa. And so we decided a few years ago to move and decentralize our staff to be closer to our clients, and we looked around the world at different places where we would create hubs. And in fact, for us, South Africa today is a hub, as far as I'm concerned, for Sub-Saharan Africa, but I'm also in charge of Latin America. So Latin America is managed out of South Africa, and I'm also in charge of our relationship with Western Europe stakeholders, and therefore Western Europe is also managed out of South Africa for us. We We have seen a tremendous growth in our business in Sub-Saharan Africa. When we moved here in 2003, realistically, we were about making an investment of $140 million a year in this region. And I think we're expecting this year, 8 years after, to have a volume of investment of close to 2.5 to 2.6 billion. So a substantial increase that has been made possible mainly because we've decentralized, but also, to be frank, because of the benefit that we got from the overall business environment in Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, what we've seen is in South Africa, a good level of infrastructure, a good way, I think, to recruit skilled labor, and a good ability, I think, to provide resources to the rest of our offices. We've had a little bit some setback, to be very honest. One has been, and I mentioned initially, we thought we would put all our resources in this country, and we had some setback in terms of security with our staff being. It was difficult at some point even to recruit people to come and join us in South Africa. So we shift a little bit our strategy, and now instead of in one hub, and to be also honest, following the Kenya event after the elections, I personally decided and convinced my management to have now 3 hubs. We have one in South Africa, one in Kenya, and one in Senegal. And to be very honest, what happened in North Africa recently has reinforced our idea that we would not put all our eggs in one basket, not only in Sub-Saharan Africa, but I think we're looking at this worldwide. Our experience so far in South Africa has been good, and we do believe that there's a good possibility, I think, to grow further the business up north. Where we've seen, I think, a lack has been, well, there's strong technical expertise here. There's strong financial resources in order to move resources up north. The understanding of the region in Central and West Africa is very limited. I think there's much more within the SADC area, but when you start to talk about Central and Western Africa, we found out that partners here in South Africa have limited experience and expertise. And that includes even a country like Nigeria.
When we talk about South Africa as a gateway, do we talk about it really to the SADC area, or is it broader than that?
No, as I said, I think if you look at the technical expertise that you have in this country and the financial potentials you would aim at Sub-Saharan Africa, I think there is a tremendous opportunity for South African business to really play a key role in Sub-Saharan Africa. And you're seeing much more now interest from other places of the world, either it's India or China, than you see from South Africa. And I think this I think should change. If you look at the energy sector, which is a huge problem I mean, it is in South Africa, but compared to other places where I've visited, I mean, South Africa has a good environment. The technical expertise that you have here in this sector is one that is needed in the rest of the continent. And so, in the banking sector, everything here could be done through the internet. I just came back from Burkina Faso, for example. I mean, there's no way you're going to pay a single bill from your home.